Yes, good evening to all our viewers and especially to our panel of Tim, John and Shane. The heading this week is boat preparation, and certainly the guys tonight are from both ends of the spectrum. I think it'd be fair to say John and Tim are from probably the Grand Prix end of the yachting, the boats they're sailing on and boats they're looking after, while Shane is very much an owner who looks after his own little BH-36 local heroes. So, as I say, but very, very different people on boat preparation. John and Tim involved on full-on race programs on very high-profile boats. But I think before we get into the boat preparation, I'd like to ask each of them how they got started in sailing and getting to where they are now. Because, running a big boat or running any boat, it takes a lot. You just don't arrive and you run a boat. There's a lot of work that goes in leading up to that. So I'll start with John first, the man we know as JH. John, Wangaratta, Victoria is where you started. It's a long way from the sea. How did you get from Wangaratta to roughly where you are now? Good evening.
Yeah.
Good evening.
Thank you. Certainly, I've had a very, very lucky life. I've had opportunities that have popped up, and I was in country Victoria, so zero sailing. Didn't really know. I think I went on a Hobie when I was 12 or something, down on a family holiday. But I was got involved in mechanical work and engineering work and hydraulics and a lot of refrigeration and electrical work as well in a variety of sort of disciplines, in vehicles and in trucks and in a lot of refrigeration on transport vehicles. And that was sort of my apprenticeship initially, and then I decided to bum around a bit, and I travelled around Australia, and when I was about 20, and then ended up in Alice Springs, which was a more benign place to sailing, although Alice Springs hosted one of the great yacht clubs of Australia. I think there was an Alice Springs Yacht Club that I was a member of, and it usually involved doing the Henley on Todd Regatta in Alice Springs in a dry riverbed, and usually involved a lot of rum and beer as well. So it wasn't necessarily a dry affair, but it was an unusual place for a yacht club. And I think a couple of years that Alice Springs Yacht Club ended up, they chartered a boat and did the Hobart races. But I spent plenty of time in Alice Springs doing more mechanical work and engineering out of the mines, and a lot of hydraulics on big earth moving stuff. And so that was sort of my trade, and sailing, I guess, wasn't near my heart at all. And then I departed Alice Springs and ended up in the Whitsundays, which was supposedly just to be a social jaunt. And I had a couple of friends who are still my good friends. Scotty Major was one of them, and he plugged me into some work over there. He said, "Oh, you can come and work on yachts and do that stuff, do some mechanical work or whatever you need." And so I got sailing in the Whitsundays, really, and that was quite late in life. I didn't start sailing until I was 30 years old, and so I was lucky enough to come in from a different approach on the sailing side of things, and I loved it immediately. Just warmed to it, and did a lot of sailing around the Whitsundays, which was on big old maxis and a lot of other social sailing. And then I was lucky enough to travel overseas and get some sailing gigs overseas, and ended up in Antigua and then sailed down to Cape Town and all around the place, and then ended up in the Med and involved in some old maxis, one Longabata, and then the old Leopard program. I worked a lot on the Leopard program and was lucky enough to get opportunities and managed to be involved. And it was it was the angle of the engineering that sort of gave you those opportunities, really, in some of those bigger race programs. And then I became more and more familiar with the functionality of the yachting program. So I was lucky enough to sort of just work my way into sailing there. And so obviously didn't grow up with all the skill set and the natural ability of the small boat sailing, but I've been lucky enough to be involved in a lot of big boats, and I just love it.
Okay, well, leave that there, John, and I'll go to Tim now. Now, Tim, your story is very different. I mean, you started sailing almost before you could walk. So let's hear your story of growing up in the sailing world.
Yeah, well, I was quite lucky, Peter. I was born into the sport basically from my father, who was building FAR 1104s and FAR 40s back down in Botany or Town Point in Botany Bay, sliding down the old moulds when I'm like 4 years old, and started sailing at St George Sailing Club as a young kid at 5 years old, and went through sky riders and flying ants and skates and skiffs, and then moved on to went to become a plumber instead of a boat builder because I didn't want to get too itchy. I was a bit over the itchiness, so I became a plumber instead for about 6 years, and still sailing. But actually, a guy called Michael Spees actually got me into the yacht side of it, and said, "Come on an offshore race." So about 18 years old, 19 years old, went to sail on his Beneteau Pinot Ned Lloyd, I think it was called. Went up to the Sydney to Gold Coast race. So and then I got hooked on offshore sailing. So and basically started doing some FAR 40s, coastal racing and just inshore racing, and I went, I can make a career out of this. So I sort of had enough of plumbing and digging holes and crawling under houses, and got my backpack with my surfboards and basically took on the world and went to the UK and did a bit of European sailing over there. And one of my friends, Zane Gills, the late Zane Gills, who passed away last Christmas time, he was over working on a boat called Leopard, which John was a part of. Walked down to the bar and met the boat captain, and he said, "Do you want a job?" And I went, "Oh, yeah." It's like a 90-foot, race boat. So I went, "Yeah, no worries." And rest was history, basically, in that kind of sense. Like, just basically took my surfboards and backpack and moved on with the Leopard program for about 6 years. And worked under John, building the Leopard 3 at McConaughey Yachts in Sydney as a plumber, I guess. Yeah, doing all the plumbing on it. So we did a lot of sailing on that, basically, yes. And, it was a good breakthrough. I was very fortunate, right time, right spot, and learnt a lot about boats, and especially canting keels and working the winches and systems. I was very fortunate to get that spot on that program, on the Leopard program, and work under Chris Sherlock and Mark Slay. Had some good times and some very good tours, and it put me into some very good places in the future. We've ended up doing the Volvo Ocean Race on the Abu Dhabi as a shore crew and helped build the boat in Italy. So it was, and walked around the world with them, and it was good, So, and then Matt.
Wonderful boats there and wonderful experiences, but we'll come to that in a moment. So Shane Connolly, welcome. Now, your story might be a bit different to these boys. Let's get your story of how this all began for you.
Peter, it's a bit of an unusual story. I was always a surfer, and in my younger days as a policeman, I was a police diver, and I was doing most of the diving operations in Canberra. And as I got older, my surfing got worse and the water in Canberra got colder. So I figured it was time I started a sport when I was probably about 28 that put me on the water rather than in the water, unwittingly knowing that you get a lot of water on the water as well as in the water. So I started out sailing in Canberra and on the south coast, and gained a real affiliation with the local club down here in Bateman's Bay, a little sailing club of about 18 yachts. And, we're sailing with them every year, and we really did a lot of coastal work up and down Montague Island, Bermagui, places like that. So a lot of our work was coastal, and then I started getting very interested in the offshore. So I've been an owner of yachts for many years now, and some race yachts, some cruising yachts, but I was drawn to Sydney, and I was drawn to the blue water scene probably about 5 years ago.
So am I right in saying, is Bateman's Bay your home?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I lived in Canberra for many years, but I live in Bateman's Bay, and I've been coming down here since the late 70s.
Right, and short-handed sailing seems to appeal to you. You've done a fair bit of that?
Yes, look, I've done quite a lot of that, sometimes through necessity. I think I've taken boats from Bateman's Bay to Sydney more times than I can remember, a lot of times on my own. A lot of times just with a crew of one, and it's I shouldn't say this, but it's a pretty good pub crawl between Bateman's Bay and Sydney. You can stop in at Ulladulla and you can get to Wollongong, and there's a pub at each port. So I tend to leave very early in the morning and get in just as the night starts, and have a few beers and relax, and then do the next leg the next day.
Well, I'll stick with you, Shane, for the moment. In preparation for a fully crewed boat to a short-handed boat in your boat, is there much involved in changing from the fully crewed to short-handed? Have you got to do a lot of work?
Yeah, there is, Pete. I think the first critical element to it is your autopilot. I think that's a really critical element to having an autopilot, which is smart enough to sail to the wind and is strong enough to sail in inclement weather. You still do a lot of hand steering. In fact, you prefer to hand steer. When you've got sail changes or you're trying to get rid of a kite, it's really important to have the two of you on that job. You know, it's hard to steer and be playing with the strings at the same time. So it's my co-skipper Graham and I, we call it's like learning how to do a new dance. And you really have to think in systems, and you've got to reef early, and your boat has to be set up well for that. I'm not a fan of furlers, but I really like hanked-on sails because they're captive. Whereas they don't get jammed, they come down, and they're attached to the forestay, not falling in the water and causing you more problems when you least need them.
Yeah. Okay, but back to you, JH. I mean, look at your CV, and I'm just looking at here now, the boats that you've been involved with. I mean, the Wild Oats, the 60-footer, Leopard, as you mentioned, Alfa Romeo 100, Wild Oats 11, Scandia Open 60, Speedboat, Loki, Moneypenny, Green Dragon, Volvo 70 and Limit. It's a pretty impressive list. So how do you sort of get involved in that? Does the owner come to you and say, look, you know, I want you to run the program, or do some of the crew come to you, or how do you get yourself involved in these really high-end programs?
Well, it's an interesting one. It's a real. I'm lucky that I've got a trade behind me. I think that assists a lot in that whole approach, and the fact that you can do a few aspects of it. You know, I've sort of got a. Obviously, my trade is my understanding of the mechanics of the thing, which is sort of an imperative part of the boat. But also, I'm lucky enough to understand sailing enough that I know what's required to get the thing functional and get the thing operational in a race manner, obviously. And the rest is really a communication role. You know, it's a real owner liaise role and trying to offer what they want. You know, the owners really, you've sort of really got to look at what sort of sailing they want to do and what they want to achieve, and then work backwards a bit, sometimes back engineer it a bit and work out what's the best solution. And luckily enough, I've just been approached by, you know, in some cases approached by the owners, and then other cases approached by the boatyard who want that component of the boat looked after. And I'm lucky in a sense because I have the ability to go sailing afterwards, so you can sort of have the continuity of being involved in the build of the boat, and which is often the case, and that's often how I've been lucky enough to be involved in these programs, is that you have the opportunity to get involved in the boat right from the start, so you sort of see it right through its process, and then you get the opportunity to sail on it afterwards and commission it and go through that whole process. So yeah, it's sometimes it is the yard, how I've come across the things, being invited by the yard to come and do the systems, and then you obviously meet everyone on the way. And sometimes sort of the owners approach you and wanting you to be the project manager representing the project. So yeah, just a lucky scenario. And I think, you know, I'm very blessed to have that trade, which I think is imperative for all these young guys coming through to work on having a trade in addition to sailing, because it sort of can assist you along the way.
Yeah. Well, Tim, similarly, you've worked on a great array of really good boats, but lately you're the boat captain of Ichiban that's won the last 2 out of 3 Rolex Sydney Hobart races, but you're also the owner's representative in the building of the last 2 Ichibans, the 60-footer and the latest one in Spain. How did that all work for you? I mean, you went in the boatyards basically and worked as the owner's rep. How much input did you have?
Oh, all the time. Like every day was like have to like push the guys, you know, with the design and make sure like the owner was always happy, always talking to like Matt Allen. Is this the way you want to go with this? Like, this is the approach, and he'll give me some points, and I would go through the points and go through the boat builders and the project manager, and very hands-on. Like, I was there in Dubai for I think it was 4 months in the end building it.
That was for the 60, was it?
The 60, the Kaki 60, yes, and the Ichiban 52. I was in Spain for 5 months basically as the project manager, and that just was non-stop every day, just always push. Like, there would be emails backwards and forwards from Australia saying, we want this thing, we want this and that, are you happy, and move on. So I had a good relationship with Matt. We never disagreed on anything, which was amazing when we build boats, and it was a pretty easy build, because we all wanted the same picture, like, this boat's built for Hobart and this is the way we're going to build it, So it was long nights and that basically, and trying to talk to Spain and then talk in Australia. So we had some pretty busy nights, getting it right.
And any fisticuffs in the yard at all, or was it all pretty placid?
Oh, it's all right. They just have to get to my lingo basically.
He's learned some good Spanish.
Yeah.
That much.
Yes, it wasn't too bad. Yes,
that would be a great experience, I'm sure. But Shane, I'll come back to you and let's now talk a bit more specifically. Okay, you're getting Local Hero ready for Hobart. So how far out do you start planning and start getting things done? And what do you do to prepare your 36-footer for the Hobart race?
Pete, I start almost as soon as I get the boat back from Hobart. I've learned that blue water racing's as much about preparation as it is about participation, particularly when you're an owner skipper, particularly when you're responsible for all of those things, not just the crew safety, the boat structure, its engineering. And so there's some really good ways to do this. I like, on Top Yacht, there's a thing under boat docs which has got a checklist of all the things you need to do to get your Cat 1. And you go through and you get those and then you load them on. And the earlier you get that done, the more time you've got for more important preparation, be it watching the weather before a race, or getting the right amount of food, the right amount of water, or getting your crew right for the race. So to me, by being prepared early and by getting the boat prepared early and ticking all those boxes, and the special regs it lists all the boxes to tick, and then doing an audit once a year to make sure that everything's still ticked, because things expires, flares expire, or medical expire, and having a sort of a standard, then really the maintaining the boat and the focus of preparation for the yacht race can go on. And so it's the early bird catches the worm, in my opinion, and it also catches the problems with the yacht, because we had a little problem that we didn't even know about on our masthead last year, and it was just those sorts of preparations that identified that we'd had a sheave right at the mast, internal in the head, that had come off, and if we'd sailed with it, it would have been catastrophic. So preparation is everything, and early preparation is important.
Sure, but do you find in Bateman's Bay it's harder to get things done? I mean, in Sydney we take a lot for granted; everything's at our doorstep. But how do you get on in Bateman's Bay?
Well, look, I leave the boat in Sydney, so it's quite easy for me. So, but it brings another interesting dynamic, and Tim touched on it with dealing in Spain. So I have to have a very good relationship with my mechanic, with my rigger, my sailmaker, and my electrician. And the local chandlery, because when you do things remotely, it's those sorts of friendships and relationships that make your preparation so much easier. They know the boat, they know where how to get on. We talk all the time, so it's really a relationship. When you're dealing with things at a distance, it's about relationships too. And those people, I consider them friends. That I might be their client, but we've got a mateship going, and that's really important, even for a little boat like mine, to have a good relationship with all of those people.
And do your crew help you at all? Or?
Yes, they do. I find that, we talk about boat preparation. As a skipper, you've got to set your standard for the crew too, as to what you expect them to have, what you expect them to carry on. what you expect them to be prepared for. Delegation of authority is really good as long as you tick the box and make sure it's done. There's nothing worse than getting halfway to Hobart and figuring the guy that was supposed to fill the gas bottle forgot to fill the gas bottle. So it's really important to delegate authority, but you've got to have the trust of your crew. And I'd say really setting a standard and having even a fun system of fines. If they turn up and has anyone got a spare water bottle, we'll fine them and make them shout at the bar. It's important that they come prepared. Because you can't, as a skipper, be running around looking for water bottles.
Yeah, sure. Well, Tim, I'll come back to you. I mean, obviously, with a program such as Ichiban, the boat does a lot of miles throughout the year. But I mean, your preparation. Let's talk about the Rolex Sydney Hobart race. I mean, that's the aim of the game, I guess, at the end of the day, to do well in that, and you've done marvellously well throughout the year. How do you go about getting the boat ready for boxing?
Well, yeah, Peter. Yes, that's our biggest, game plan for the Sydney Hobart is to win, of course. And so we're about 3 months out. We would start to prep and get some sails and work and do a lot of training, of course, and do a lot of different modes with the boats and different angles. We have a lot of good sailors on board, and and a lot of technical, components with the navigator, with all the polars of the boat speed and which is the best angle. So, I mean, for me personally, we don't stop for 5-6 days for the 3 months. Like, I'm non-stop. Like, I'm there an hour before the crew arrive or anyone arrive, just to double check the boat, just to make sure there's no little hiccups or little gremlins before we go on a blue water race or leading up to Hobart. It's pretty stressful the last 2 weeks. Like, we
Are you by yourself, or do you have backup help?
Oh no, I have 2 other guys that come with me who are full time, who actually sail on the boat, which helps a hell of a lot because I've got a lot of trust in them, and it's got to be done right, and they're very good at what they do. So I don't need to check on them every 5 minutes to do the jobs, like, because they know that if something goes wrong, it's probably their fault. So they'll do the best they can at what they can. So, and we have a lot of good contractors that help us out at the last minute if like electrical thing fails, or sail makers or riggers. We're very fortunate that we have a lot of support in the background that can come and jump on and solve the issue straight away. So that's at the high end. It's very, for like, Shane, who's owner, it's very hard for them to pay for someone or get someone out straight away, where we can sort of ring up and go, can you please help us now? Like, this is Boxing Day morning, can you come and help? And they can come and help. But yes, it's a non-stop for 3 months, basically. We don't stop, Yeah.
I want to talk about the rig. I mean, obviously with high-tech rigging, standing rigging, how often do you pull the rig and check everything? And do you send the actual standing rigging away to be tested?
No, I think we do the rigging every 5 years now by Sovereigns or Future Fibres. We've got to send off the carbon rigging back to Spain, and that takes about a 6-week turnaround. But we service the rig once a year, basically. So we probably do it sometime before Hobart, not 2 months before Hobart, or straight after Hobart. So, and now we're starting to do a bit of NDT testing, which is ultrasounding the spreaders and the mast, just to make sure that there's no cracks or any faults, because they're such a delicate piece of equipment and very high tech and lightweight. You've got to be really examining the rig all the time. So we have our rigger would come down once a month and just do a rig check, make sure there's no grub screws loose, no anything like ropes chafing or anything, or checking his strands have been worn out on the rigging. Yeah.
And does Ichiban have 2 rigs, or you've only got the 1 rig?
Oh, we've got 2 rigs. We've got an inshore rig and an offshore rig. The inshore rig is brand new last year after our other one had a failure in the last year's Sydney to Gladstone race. Brisbane to Gladstone race. We had a rig failure in Moreton Bay. Yeah, so we just had it about 6 months ago, purchased a new one of an inshore mast, which is a little bit different. There's no reef points. It's a single reef, bit lighter, about 20 kilos lighter. So there's not much difference.
I'll just stick with the 2 rigs. you do a Cabbage Tree Island race, which is part of the Blue Water point score. Presumably, do you look at the forecast and say we should put the offshore rig in, or do you keep with the inshore rig, or how do you work that?
Oh, I leave that to the big man, actually. I leave it to Matt because he's the owner. I mean, me personally, sometimes want to keep the offshore rig in, but, Matt will decide, which mast he would prefer to put in, So we wait for the big boss to make the call on that. So, yeah, I mean, basically he gets it right. No, we maybe put the offshore rig in, say, 5 weeks before Hobart, and that's when we start to get it tuned in. And I mean, both rigs are very tuned in, and they're just plug and play. We've got it pretty sorted now with all the training we do. So yeah, but yes, mostly we should be on the offshore rig personally. Yeah.
Right. Well, JH, over to you. Jim Cooney rings you, or Sandy Oatley rings you and said, "Look, we're going to Hobart in a 100-footer. Get her ready." Where do you start?
Yeah, where do you start? Well, for one, it's a great opportunity, but I guess in the process, we use the whole year really. It's the whole thing's a lead up. Historically in the Wild Oats program, often the boat we'd pull it apart, disassemble it fully, keel off, rudder out, rigs out, boards out, all the knives, whatever we'd pull out of it, and put it in the shed. So it gave us a great opportunity in the first 6 months of the year to absolutely go over everything. So everything, like Timmy says, we'd NDT all the composite structure, NDT all the keel, mechanical structures, the rams, all that sort of thing. And, in some of those programs, it's a great opportunity to be 100% thorough, and it's great working with those programs because we have those opportunities to be 100% thorough. You can, my philosophy on the whole thing is you've got to walk away the night before Hobart race and there's no grey areas at all that you haven't looked at. So you've been 100% thorough on every aspect of the boat. So there's nothing worse than going to sea with something unknown. Oh, what's in the corner of that bilge, or why is that? So my philosophy on that is you walk away 100% knowing everything's 100%, and you can sleep, and it's easy. And luckily in those sort of programs, you have a whole lot of people involved that you can share the load with. Obviously there's a fair bit of direction that needs to be given, but we're lucky enough to have good riggers, good composite guys, good sail makers, and often good mechanical guys associated. So you can delegate those sort of roles very well, and as long as you're thorough in double checking everyone, not in a sense of micromanaging, but in a sense of ensuring that the list of jobs is completed and those guys, if everyone's done their area, then the system really works. In a training mode, the last 3 months pre-Hobart is, as Tim says, usually the most intense time. For one, we've got all the blue water stuff, which is all our training programs, and a lot of just day sailing and training. And we've got everyone involved. You have everyone from the navigators who, in the past with Jim's boat, it was wonderful. We had Stan there full time constantly tweaking our polars, constantly tweaking our instruments the whole time. Stan said we collected more data in that 2018 program that Jim Cooney beautifully ran than what he'd collected in 4 years on Comanche, because we did beautiful consistent sailing with consistent crew, with our good sail program, with everything running properly. So you can get really finite at that end of it, but you've still got to cover all the bases. You've still got to cover the simple things that can fail. And the beauty of the Comanche program and the Oats program is that, luckily enough, the owners are so passionate about their sailing, and they love to ensure that everything's 100%. They don't want to have any failures. So the resources are there to be able to do it properly, and there's nothing more satisfying than being able to prepare a boat 100% and go to Hobart and you don't even have one thing break. So that's the satisfying bit from my perspective.
Yeah. Well, Shane, back to you. I guess that these two programs that Tim's running and JH is running a somewhat different to the local hero program. So, and I think you're probably more like a majority of the people that race the Blue Water Point Score, that, you know, a lot of the owners and their crew do their own maintenance. How often would you pull the rig out of local hero? Is that an annual thing you do and check the rigging?
We pulled it out last year, but we basically check it every year, and I have it rechecked before Hobart. So I do a mid-year check, and then before Hobart, a few weeks out, I get the rigger and I get him up as well, so to check it out. Last year was a hard year for me because we did put a lot of money into the rig, fixing it up. But it's good now; it's in great shape. But then you've got people think a lot about rig, but they got to remember running rigging too, you know. So we put all new halyards on us. It's very easy to say, okay, I've got new rod, I've got new turnbuckles, isn't that good? And you leave these old daggy halyards on that are the thing that are going to let go when you least want them to let go. And certainly I've had that happen to me, and I've learned a good lesson there. So your running rigging is so important. So it's a yearly program, and we also run a SWOT analysis after every race. We do a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threat analysis of how we went. So we do all the blue waters because that is a great training ground for offshore racing. And in that, we look at any breakages or any potential problems so that we can identify those, the whole crew, and then we deal with those before they become a problem. And that's how we run the boat.
Have you got an alloy mast or is it carbon mast?
Yeah, it's alloy, and it's got stainless riggers. So we're going back to stainless spreaders, excuse me. So it's going back a long way. Beautiful old mast, and it's been fully refurbished. It's a great mast. I think the Sydney Harbour Trust want to borrow it to prop up the bridge lately. It's that strong.
And what about your motor? Is that how old's the engine in the boat?
Motor's a Yanmar 30. It's reconditioned, but it's in great order. And again, I get that serviced twice a year. Whether it needs it or not, it gets serviced. It gets serviced before Hobart, and it gets serviced when I come home from Hobart. Because you put a lot of miles on that motor when you're coming home.
Sure.
I think it's really important for people who are thinking about Hobart or doing on boats like mine to remember that the trip home from Hobart can be every bit as hard, if not harder, than the trip to Hobart. So your boat's got to be as prepared for coming home as it was for going there.
Yeah, it's certainly harder on the liver sometimes too.
Absolutely. We had a hard trip last year coming home. We really did. We got absolutely pasted between Point Hicks and Gabo. It was really not good at all. And I was happy that the boat was ready and we were up for it.
Yeah. And what about the rudder? Do you drop the rudder annually or?
No, we don't. But the rudder bearings is something I'm really quite conscious of. So every time the boat slipped, that's one of the things that I insist is check to see if there's any play in there at all. The BHs, the Sydney 36s, have a little bit of an issue with their rudder bearing, and if there's the tiniest bit of slop in it, I'll be replacing it.
Right. Well, the same question really to JH and Tim. Tim, first, how much pressure do you feel putting the whole program together? And, you know, is your heart in your mouth the whole time to Hobart? You hope nothing fails because you haven't done your job? Or is it just, you're confident when you hit that starting line that everything's right and you're doing your best, obviously, out there, and fingers crossed nothing does fail?
Oh no, I'm pretty confident because I just get everything 100%, like, so I can sleep the night before, like John said. Like, I know that it's all ready to go. I just go through my head the whole time, like 2 weeks before the Hobart, everything's going through my head, like, should I replace that? Should I replace that? And I do, and I just go, just peace of mind. So when I'm going down, yeah, there's some eerie moments when you go in the Hobart, of course, when the crew are sending the boat, you know, full noise, and you're going, oh, if anything breaks, it's going to come and they're just going to look at me. So I just make sure I just replace things. I think it's a bit dodgy, I just go replace it. Like, you know, that how, like Shane was saying to Harry, you just replace it because you just don't, you know, we've got 14 guys on the boat and we want to do well, and you don't want like a, you know, $500 halyard to ruin your race. So I just make, the biggest thing I find preparing for a Hobart race is the engine. The engine is your heart of your boat. if you haven't got that service or mechanically done, that could shut down your race. You know, you can't radio in because you can't charge for the HF radio, or if you get in trouble, you can't, you know, motor, you know, or someone falls overboard. You've got to have, you know, the engine running and propulsion working. So my biggest key thing is making sure that engine is 100% and then start going from there. So, yeah, I have my heart in my mouth sometimes, you know, and on a windy night, you know, hoping nothing, hear a couple of bangs and you go, oh, what's that? But yeah, but you sort of go, oh, it'll be okay. We'll get there, you know. So once I get around Tasman Light, I feel a lot more relaxed in the end, basically. Yeah, very relaxed.
I'll talk about Tasman Light now with you, JH, and motors running, etc. I'll take you, I don't know how good your memory is, but I'll take the 2006 Rolex Sydney Hobart race, and Wild Oats 11 had sort of punched down the Tassie coast. And the last tack into Tasman Island, we're on starboard, we were tacking off to port to lay Tasman and into Storm Bay. We tacked, or the boat tacked, and with the canting keel, the motor's running continuously. It drives the hydraulic winches, it drives the keel. We tacked, pushed the buttons to make everything go, and nothing happened. The engine stalled and the boat lay almost capsized off Tasman Island. How'd you feel then?
Oh, that's the nightmare. You know, that's the one time that you dread. You know, it's something that you can be as prepared as you like, and you've covered all your bases. And it's the thing with those, you know, boats like Oates and Comanche. It's as much as the night before, I'm happy that we're 100%, but you know, there's the unknown factor that you can never anticipate. And yeah, I remember that vividly. The electronic issues we had there that caused some problems, but yeah, look, your heart sort of certainly comes up through your mouth. There's no doubt, and you immediately have to start thinking, how can we, you know, what have we got? You've got to sort of recognise the issues quickly and try and make a resolve the best you can. You know, we've had some curly ones on the way, but luckily, touch wood, we've managed to get through them all. But it certainly isn't for a nice feeling.
Well, I think there was 24 on the crew, and 23 of us all looked at each other and all yelled out JH at the one time to do something, and you were pushing buttons because, as Tim mentioned, the motor, I mean, a motor on a canting keel boat with hydraulic winches and hydraulic keel, I mean, it's the energy, it's the oxygen that the boat needs. Without it, you're history, aren't you?
Yeah, certainly. You're certainly relying on a whole lot. And early days in Wild Oats, we had redundancy. You know, we had a little generator type engine that could hydraulically drive something at slow speed. So that was our redundancy. But, you know, due to weight and performance, you sort of start relying on what you've got. And look, you know, again, preparation's the key. You service everything nicely. You have some faith in the old girl, and you start, when you sort of live and breathe it throughout the year, you start to really talk to your engine nicely and treat it like your ex-girlfriend, or maybe better than your ex-girlfriend. But it's one of the things that is always the nightmare for me. You know, the engine failure. Like if it breaks or throws a rod out the side, or if it has a major mechanical malfunction, that's the issue. But you know, preparation's the key, and servicing, and you just have to rely on that, and you have to have a good understanding of what ifs. You know, we always have a great scenario through the course of the blue water stuff. What ifs, you know, and we write list after list of what ifs. I talk to the rigger guys. What if this breaks? You know, and I'm constantly talking to the great guys we have on board. You know, what if that sheet comes out? What are we going to do? What if there's any scenarios that could happen? And it's an imperative part of my program is to build redundancy for what ifs, you know, and it comes as a balance, because you can take 1 million spare parts, but you'll use 0 of them mostly. But if you have a backup plan, then there's your exit strategy, you know, out of the issue. So, you know, in that case, you know, we had some good redundancies in Wild Oats where we could move the keel, we could free float the keel if we needed to. You know, you can tack the boat and then float the keel to the other side, then tack it back, lock it down, and then tack it back. So we had ways of getting around so we could continue sailing. You know, we could top handle the winches if the hydraulics weren't working. we had some redundant plans. We could manually pump sail functions if the engine wasn't running. So that was our redundancy there, and that's the worst case redundancy. And in that case, I think we just got the engine running again, didn't we? And we had a PLC problem with the engine, but in that case, it was a pretty benign one, and that was something you very hard to cater for. That was a power supply to the PLC, 36 volt power supply, something to the PLC. So we struggled with that one. Anyway, we got through.
Shane, I'd ask you a question that's often asked, I guess, and winch maintenance. How do you handle winch maintenance? Do you do it yourself, or do you get someone else to do it? Or because the old story is that blokes do their own servicing and they think it's all back together, and then when they look in the bucket, there's 2 bits left over. I mean, how does someone get into winch servicing? How would you do that?
Look, I usually do it myself, but this year, for that very reason, I got someone who does it professionally. I thought, I put all this money, I put all this time and all the effort of the crew. Some of my crew are flying from interstate to get the boat ready. I don't want to have a pull spring stick and someone hurt because I didn't get the winches serviced. So this fellow is well known for his work on winches. He did a fine job, and I think this year I'll do, at the start of the season, we're starting up now, I'll do another service myself. But before Hobart, I'll re-engage him. I had a very good friend who was on a very good boat who had her cheek cracked by a winch that let go, and handle spun around and fractured her cheek terribly. It's important stuff. You think about the loads that are on winches.
Sure.
These are really important things. And so the skippers out there that are owner skippers like me, you've got a duty of care to your crew, and you can't skimp if you're going to meet that duty of care. And on little crews like ours, you form a very close relationship. They're like family, and so you look after your family. So I do get a professional do it once a year. One thing with motors that people were talking about, we talk about the engine, but often some of us on our little boats, we forget the sail drive. And I couldn't recommend highly enough to have the transmission oil dropped out every slip every year, because the number of boats I've seen go belly up because their sail drivers let the show down rather than the engine itself. So that's a little one that's worthwhile thinking about.
Yeah, okay. Tim, just more on specifically you rather than the boat at this stage. I see you must love this short-handed sailing. You did double-handed trip England to Turkey 2 years ago, single-handed Hobart to Bateman's Bay in 2017, double-handed circumnavigation of Tasmania in 2017. That's all pretty impressive.
Yeah, look, I like short-handed sailing. It challenges you because you've got to be the navigator, you've got to be the engineer, you've got to be the helmsman, and you've got a lot to deal with. There's a lot of sea miles there, and you learn a lot when you're in those conditions. We talk in Hobart about transitions of weather. When you're really starting to do ocean passages, you really do see some big transitions in weather. And we used to have a saying in the police force that used to say something like "fail to prepare to fail." And when you are short-handed, you really need to prepare, and you need to be ready for things that'll happen. So you reef a little bit earlier, and you're watching your barometer, things like that. You don't have weather data a lot of the time. If you're lucky enough to have an iridium go, you might get a little bit of data once a day. So you start looking up and looking at the clouds and looking at what they're doing, and sailing a little bit the old way. And I enjoy that. I was really interested last week listening to the navigation presentation and reminiscing of the days of a sextant. I've been on a boat when all the electronics fail, and when it does, you really need to know how to sail with little bits of string hanging off your shrouds, and God bless compasses. They're pretty bloody reliable things,
Yeah. Well, Johnny JH, 15 Hobart races, 12 with Wild Oats with 8 line honours, Hobart with Leopard and 2 Hobarts with Comanche and 1 line honours, 3 Fastnets, 2 Bermuda races, 1 transatlantic, 10 Garagula races. Not a bad CV. What a couple of highlights for you?
Oh, the highlights are the Hobarts, I think. The great race, as we call it. There's certainly you can get anything thrown at you in a Hobart race, and it's one of the great things. It's a great, the sailing thing, and it made me appreciate it more starting late in life on it, is it's a great discipline for preparation, as Shane says. It always comes back and bites you on the arse. The ocean, you can never capture everything. It'll always come back and win somewhere along the line. So the discipline of preparation is the ultimate thing, I think, in that side of it. But look, the Hobart race is certainly some of the greatest races. The Fastnet, we won a Fastnet and line honours and line honours and record in Leopard, in the water ballast Leopard, which was great. And actually, no, in the new Leopard, in the Leopard 3. And look, some of those, we've had some great races in the Med. The Duralia race is a great short, 260 mile offshore, and that's a great one. We were lucky enough to win a handicap on that with a Maxi 72 last year on Kalila, and that's a great race. It depends. You have some great experiences, and it's down to the crew and down to the boat, and luckily enough, I've been able to travel around and experience some of these great races. The Transpac last year on the Comanche was one of a great race as well.
Yeah, well, it's a terrific CV. So, Tim, to you, I guess, looking at your CV, I guess the Rolex Sydney Hobart victories would be probably top of the list.
Yeah, for sure, Peter. Yes, I think the first one was 2017 was definitely the big highlight. I just built the boat, in Spain, and we bring it out in October. It was such a special moment for all of us, basically. Because Matt's been trying for a long time to actually win it overall, and for us just to build the boat and launch it and then win it that year was just a great. It was just like, wow, this is awesome. Like, this is a really good feeling. So we had a good crew, and it was just a great feeling. The boat, nothing wrong with the boat. The boat held up and nothing broke, and we just went, it was a very good feeling. And last year was a good feeling too, to win it overall again, So, a lot of preparation and a lot of good boats out there last year. We have 150 boats and, 10 TPs against us. That was a very nice one to win as well. But I think 2017 was definitely my moment, I reckon, for sure. Yes. Yeah.
Shane, I noticed you've sailed a bit with Roger Hickman. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, I did 2 seasons with Roger up until he passed away. So.
Yeah, sure. And what about crew selection, Shane? I mean, obviously, as the owner skipper, and you'd pick your own crew, but I mean, does anyone assist you there? I mean, like to have a mate or someone that races with you regularly?
Yeah, look, I guess it's fair to say that I've got my senior crew and my junior crew. I think it's very important for boats like mine to be taking on new sailors, people new to the sport. We took on a young lady last year who was absolutely excellent. It was her first year in blue water, and she did very well. So I do talk to the senior members of the crew a fair bit, but ultimately on little boats like mine, I guess there's 2 criteria. One is capability, and the other one is, which I place as equally as important, is commitment, because we're all amateurs, and so people have families and children and netball competitions and all of those things. And in the case of my crew, a lot of them travel distances. They're travelling from the south coast. Last year, one of their guys was from Brisbane, another from Tasmania. So there's big commitments, and I see commitment as a great part of loyalty, and so I'll rate that as important as capability. Whereas if you might have a very capable person who wants to sail one race with you, well, that doesn't really cut it for me, and I'm probably a bit hard there, but I'd rather have 8 committed sailors than 1 rock star and 7 pissed off sailors.
Yeah. So let's talk about the season coming up. I mean, things are opening up as far as the the virus situation is concerned, the racing's begun at the CYC. The notice of race is out for this year's Rolex Sydney Hobart, and for the first time ever, it's going to be short-handed, a two-handed division. Where are you at with all of that, Shane? Will you be doing that as a two-handed division?
So we're going to do the Bird Island race double-handed, see how we go and how the boat goes. And then we're going to do the Gold Coast race double-handed. We think we're ready and the boat's ready. And if that's successful, I'll make the final decision. I've been in touch with all of my crew, so they know that's the situation. And we'll either make the decision to go back to a crewed boat or to keep going as a double-handed boat. So I guess it's a question mark at the moment.
Right. Okay. Tim, to you, do you have much input with Matt as regards crew selection is concerned? I mean, I know you've had a very stable crew over the years, but I mean, do you have much input there with Matt?
No, I don't actually. No, we've got our sailing master, Gordon Maguire, who does the crew list, and he just works with Matt, and I might have a little say, but I'll be like a 10% say in the crew. But our crew's been with us for 6 or 7 years now. Like we've got a big core crew, and that's why we get so successful so many times, because our crew is very core and we trust each other and we just get on with the job. And we're very lucky to have the same guys turn up each race. Yeah. And the new guys that come.
What about yourself?
Yeah, sometimes, it depends on the scenario, obviously in the Wild Oats, you could put your suggestions forward. Rico and Bobo used to, coordinate the crew they wanted and that sort of stuff. So that was fairly well managed. Jim came into it fairly green, I guess, from a pro program in a sense of big boat program. So there was a lot of input initially from me. We ended up securing some good sailing masters and some guys that were very heavily involved, and so Jim decided a lot on the crew, but with input, we sort of put a lot on the table for him, and then he made some decisions from there, from a personality perspective and from an experience perspective, and we nailed down, in the end, quite a secure, long-standing crew, and Jim's very, very loyal to the crew, and the crew became very loyal to the boat and to Jim, and it was good. It was good, but initially, probably some options, I inputted, but in the end, probably not so much so, yeah.
And where's Comanche now, John? What's the situation with her?
Comanche, we put on the ship on the 9th of April, I think, and it went to La Ciotat in France. So it's still on the Heart in La Ciotat, and there's talk of it getting launched late in July. And hopefully, the IMA have announced 4 regattas in Europe. So for the Maxis, so the Maxi Worlds is one. The Palma Vella, they've postponed till a late September date, I think.
But the boat's been sold, is that correct? The boat's
been sold. Mm-hmm. Yep, to a Russian gentleman, and it's been managed and run by Mitch Booth, who's an avid Australian sailor.
Yeah, okay. All right, some questions are rolling in. Shane, I'll give you this one. Feeding the crew, how do you go about that, and what do you do there?
Well, we have advanced electronics on Local Hero. Our refrigerator is run by ice. So we've come across a meal that it's not freeze dried. It's quite good. It's vacuum packed. And it's from a camping company, and it's just a matter of putting that in the bag in hot water and heating it up, which is great with our very, very high-tech methylated spirits stove. So we feed the crew. They get a hot meal every day, of course, and it's a great little meal because it's full of veggies and protein. It doesn't weigh much, and they literally eat it out of the bag. So there's not a lot of washing up, which is also quite pleasant. We feed our crew well because it is a little boat and it's quite wet at times. So keep a well-fed crew is a crew that will keep going for you and will survive the cold. But when they get wet, no matter how good the wet weather gear is, if they're not getting fed, they start to suffer. So plenty of hot drinks, plenty of hand food. A hot meal every day, and and some of the better parts of the last year's Hobart, we were able to make some nice pancakes for breakfast, and they're again easy to make on a metho stove.
Right. We're getting towards the end, which has been terrific, really. But Shane, if you race two-handed, how do you run the boat?
Okay, it's a little bit like that cartoon where one cartoon character checks in and the other one and says good morning, and the other one checks out and says good night. So I think the best way to describe two-handed sailing is single-handed sailing until you need to change something, and then it's double-handed sailing. So you're running a watch system, and it's very important to run your watch system. But then it's also important when there's something on to have both of you up.
Right. Tim, the watch system on Ichiban on the 52, how you said 14 crew, is that correct?
15.
How do you run your watches there?
We have 3 lots of 5. 14. I think we do we always have 9 on deck, and the navigator floats because he's under pressure. Will actually gets a bit under pressure, so we let him just float because there's so many different things that happen in the race. So he's got to be, woken up or switched on. So we have I think we have 4, 5, and 5. So basically 9 on deck, and sometimes there's 10 on deck. And that's how we can operate the boat with 10 on deck and 4 downstairs or 5 downstairs. And
do you have the designated helmsman as such, or does everyone have a bit of a go?
No, so we have a watch captain on each watch, and then we have 2 drivers who back him up. So the watch leader would drive per hour, and then we would have the backup drivers. I mean, there's probably 10 drivers on the boat that can drive the boat. So we're pretty fortunate in that state. But yeah, our main drivers are watch captain and then the backup. So we do a watch of 3 on and 2 off, and just rolls on a rotation like that. Yeah.
Right.
So.
All right. Now, JH, for you, finally, I think we're nearly at 7 o'clock and we've answered all the questions. I'm just looking here. Yep. So what's coming up for you? I mean, are you going overseas to help? Are you still involved with Comanche program?
Well, yeah, I was involved. Obviously, the corona sort of got us there a little bit. We were going to originally go and assist in the first couple of regattas and do a bit more of a sort of in-depth handover. The guy that's running the thing now is quite competent, so there's no problems there. But just familiarity with a lot of the processes is requires a good handover. So luckily, he did delivery back from Hawaii with us on the Transpac, so he's quite familiar with the boat. So I can communicate with him a lot on the processes, and really, yeah, it's a bit of an unknown at this point in time. We've just got the coronavirus, limitations of our travel, so it's very limited on what we can do. But yeah, so it's a bit of an unknown, really.
Yeah. Well, finally, I guess to you, JH and Tim, there's a young bloke watching this now and says, "Wow, that's fantastic! Comanche, Wild Oats, Ichiban." How would you advise someone to get into a program like that might take them around the world? To you first, JH. I think you alluded probably get a trade, something like that, electrical.
Look, it's very much my opinion, and it's been an interesting phase. I think the last couple of years, or the last probably 10 years since I sort of came in. I came in from a bit of a different aspect to the normal. A lot of these young guys and a lot of sailors that are sailing now of my age have grown up being yachties all their life. I came in from a different aspect, so I sort of had a different view on it. And my opinion would be to have an associated trade. I've seen, and you see now even the coronavirus situation, all the pro sailors sitting at home with zero work, and that's just one aspect of it. But, to be a competent part of the crew and to be a committed part of the crew, it's important you have another role other than just sailing, I think. And to have a trade, whether it be sail making or rigging or mechanical or any aspect of that, have a trade skill, I think certainly from the way I've been running boats and having people associated, it offers a whole lot more opportunities for people to be involved. And I think you have a whole lot better mechanical understanding of the functionality of the yacht. So my recommendations would be certainly keep your sailing up, do your sailing, get as much experience sailing, walk the docks, but also don't forget to also work in addition to that, and hard work, and don't be a cheeky little bugger is the best resolve for any young fellas coming into it.
Good on you. And Tim, I think you'd agree with that, would you?
Oh, JH has just nailed it. It's basically you need a good tray behind you, and just work hard. And you might have to work 14-hour days. You know, you can't go, oh, I'm hungry now. You just go, bad luck. You just got to keep working. And if you know, some kids get a bit cheeky, like JH said, and you just have to put them down a few pegs and just say, this is reality. You know, you can be a pro sailor, but to keep working in the industry, it's good to have a backup as, you know, working on the boats. Like, we always need people to help us maintain boats, you know. So just keep your head down and work hard, and that's the way you get through. And just, you know, work the docks, and you learn off good guys, and you'll go a long way in the industry, basically. Yeah. So
okay, well, very late questions come in. I'll give it to you, JH. Talking about the engines, how often, if at all, do you do a freshwater flush?
Well, it depends on what sort of engine you've got. You know, it's if you've got an engine that is pure saltwater cooling, then it's imperative you do a freshwater flush. You know, the otherwise saltwater is going to sit randomly in the whole entirety of your engine. So most engines these days are saltwater over freshwater. So the engine, the immediate materials and metals in the engine are protected very well with the coolant and the fly coals in the fresh water that's already there. The cooling elements are designed to carry salt water. So look, in a perfect world, you would treat it like your outboard engine. You would flush it. You could flush it every day, but that's unrealistic for a boat that sits in the water. So the important thing is, on a later model engine, is to, whenever you're out of the water, you should flush it whenever you're removing the boat from the water. Otherwise, salt water will sit there and often dries out, and that creates the salt and the corrosion as you add oxygen to it. And obviously, regular servicing of your cooling elements, which is something you should probably do. You know, there's a routine for every engine, so the specifications will tell you on that. You know, like a Yanmar engine, every 2 years you should really do your cooling elements, and every time you're out of the water, then fresh water flush it.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, we'll wrap up now. Tim, thank you very much. Best of luck with Ichiban this year. Maybe you can rewrite the history books, becoming a 3-time winner. And I think you deserve a medal. Anyone that started ocean racing with Speezy and you're still going.
Yeah. I know. No, you put me in a good spot, you know. Yep. Yeah. Took me out of the skiffs and took me into yacht racing. So, the rest is history, of course.
Yes. JH, thanks very much, mate. It's lovely to talk to you again and see you around. Best of luck. And Shane, to you, it's been fascinating to hear your story. But, I mean, if you're going two-handed, Johnny hasn't got a ride to Hobart. He'd love to go with you, I'm sure. I mean, he could do all the maintenance for you.
I was thinking that. I think he
totally. There you go.
Yeah.
I'll send you his phone number.
Anyway. How fast does he go, Shane?
All right. Well, Tim.
Really fast.
Tim, JH and Shane, thank you very much. And we hope everyone's enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun, and to hear all the different stories, it's really terrific. And hope to see you all around the yacht club. As I said, the racing's begun at the CYC, the Sunday races. The first race was Ladies' Day last Sunday. Conditions weren't that great, but there are over 60 boats out there. So it recommences this Sunday, and Wednesday afternoon racing's on. So it's great to see the club starting to get back to action. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week. And good night to you all. Thank you.